Welcome back to another episode of Away from Hale End, and we've got a familiar face with us today. That is Kev from Next Gen Arsenal. We're going to be discussing what to expect from the academy in the upcoming season, focusing mostly on the under 21s. The under 18s are always a little bit hard to tell this early on because there's going to be some scholars and some younger players who we don't even necessarily realize are going to be a part of the squad. But we should be able to figure out what to expect from the under 21s. Before we get into it, Kev, how are you? Have you seen the under 21s in any of their friendlies in the summer, or what's the latest with you?
I'm good, thank you. I was just saying to you off camera, it's the hottest day of the year here, and I'm struggling to deal with it big time. Um, I haven't managed to see the under 21s in pre-season. I was meant to go to the Lincoln game the other week, and something happened and I couldn't go, which I was kicking myself about. Even though we lost, it would have been nice to see some of the players. But I was at the game yesterday at the Emirates. That was really exciting. It was great to see Ethan and Myles on the pitch integrating with the first team, which they just feel a part of now, which is really exciting. We've been patient. We've waited for a long time for this, and it's finally here now, and it feels very real that they're going to be a mainstay in that first team picture.
For sure. And let's just get right into it with Ethan and Myles. And I'd having a little bit as well. Obviously, there were a bunch of players who traveled to the U.S. on the preseason tour, including Josh Nichols, who impressed, and some others. But Ethan and Myles, it does really feel like the two of them are going to be first team players this year, but
Yeah,
probably not tons and tons of minutes for them. Do you expect to still see them with the under 21s here and there, or really mostly sticking around that first team?
yeah, exactly that. You'd expect they will play some games with the under 21s. They'll need to be kept sharp, so when they are called on in the first team, they've got some games under their belt. So I think it'll be important that they're still playing with the under 21s and still continuing their development from there. But I certainly do expect them to spend a lot of time on the bench. I think they'll come on here and now in the Premier League and get the odd minutes. I don't expect it to be tons, like we said, but I think it will come. I think we'll for sure see Myles make his Premier League debut. But I think the cups will be an opportunity for them to really shine and to really prove their worth. The League Cup definitely, and the FA Cup, and then I think even getting some minutes off the bench in some of those Champions League group games is achievable as well. So I
Yeah,
definitely
especially
expect to see it.
especially with that league format now. We've got 8 Champions League matches before the knockout round, so that potentially find yourself secured a spot all the way through to the knockout rounds a little earlier. You might see even a little bit more of them.
Absolutely. And it really just feels like they're ready. I was watching the game. I was there yesterday, as I mentioned, and they just look so unfazed by everything. They just look like they belonged. I mean, Miles Lewis-Skelly was playing on the left, and he just looked comfortable. It's not a completely familiar position to him. It's one he's learning and developing in. Um, but he just looked so comfortable in possession, and he didn't stick out at all. You wouldn't have known he was a young player that hasn't yet made his debut for the first team. He just looked like he belonged there. And Ethan, likewise, when he came on, he just immediately wanted to make things happen, and he was constantly looking to get in those pockets of space where he could receive. And Odegaard, you could see, was always looking for him. As soon as he got the ball, where's Ethan? And you can see a relationship starting to develop there, which is amazing. Ethan had a great opportunity at one point that fell onto his right foot. I would have loved it to have fallen onto his left foot. He just didn't quite get the purchase on it he wanted when he tried to curl it with his right foot. He just makes things happen, and it's really exciting to watch.
For sure. You mentioned Myles, obviously, on that left hand side, that left back role, whatever you want to call it, inverted left back. He's actually been playing a little bit wider than I expected at times
Yeah.
at that left back role. And it's a question I've been getting all summer. Is that his preferred position? Is that where he'll play for Arsenal in the future? My answer has been no. This is a player who thrives in midfield. This is a player who can't even be limited to just playing as a deep lying playmaker as a six. This is a player who needs to be able to carry and roam a little bit freer, as good as his defensive actions are. Someone who can really get things done in the final third. And we've seen that over and over again. We saw it a lot in the FA Youth Cup a couple of years ago and with the under 21s in the past year. But I've been saying that left back may be the best place for him to kind of assert himself in this first team to start. You're probably not throwing him in paired with Declan Rice in midfield this early on. Is that what you agree with? You see him as a left back probably the next year or so, and then hopefully his future should still be as an 8.
I think his future will still be as an 8, but it's really hard to tell, isn't it? Because when Mikel Arteta puts a player on a pitch, you sort of think you know what's going to happen, and then the opposite happens. So Myles came on to play left back yesterday, and immediately he started inverting into the centre of the pitch, and thought, right, we know what's going to happen now. But then 10 minutes later, he's overlapping on the left-hand side, and he's sort of stayed away from the middle for a while. And likewise, when Calafiori came on, he immediately inverted into the middle, and then it's really hard to predict with Mikel, isn't it? He's always been that sort of manager where you never quite know what he's thinking, and I guess that's why he's the genius he is. He's always one step ahead of everybody. So what will happen with Myles is really hard to tell, but I think if we look at his ability, it screams for the middle of the pitch, doesn't it? And I think that's where we will eventually see him, and I think this playing on the left will do a lot for his development. And I was thinking about this in terms of the 21s. If he went back to the 21s, where would he play? Would he go back to where he knows in the centre of the field as an 8, or will he go to left back so we can continue with that development? And I'm sort of caught in two minds of what should happen there, and it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
For sure. And you mentioned the under 21s, probably good to start getting into what that team will look like this year, because I think for the first time in maybe 3, 4, 5 years, this is really a team that's going to be unfamiliar to a lot of people. Like, out of the starting 11 every week, there are not going to be a bunch of names that people have either seen a lot of or heard a lot of prior to this preseason. And no position better to start at than goalkeeper, where we signed 2 18-year-old goalkeepers this summer. It does seem like Tommy Setford may be set to play a little bit more alongside the first team, depending on what happens with Ramsdale. Obviously, Carl Hayne has gone out on loan. You could see Setford as that third keeper. James Hilson left as well. That really was kind of his role for a while. Setford was pretty close to the Ajax setup, so it makes sense. But this goalkeeper position, and we talk about it all the time offline, that it's a very hard one to judge. But it seems like one that's absolutely stacked with talent for Arsenal. Lucas Nygaard was a good signing. Brian Okonkwo and Alexi Rojas have been excellent for many years at the academy level, as well as some even younger players with Kari Ranson and Jack Porter, who are rated incredibly highly in the England Youth International setup as well. Goalkeeper for the Arsenal under-21s, to me, feels like it's really going to be a true rotation. I don't think anybody has set their name down in stone as the starter. Who are some of your favorites at that position for this team?
Well, I agree. I think it'll be all about rotation, and I've really liked Brian Okonkwo for a long time. He's just got an excellent frame for a goalkeeper. All 4 keepers, by the way, Rojas, Setford, Nygaard, Okonkwo, distribution-wise, they all look brilliant, and it seems to be that they're that profile of goalkeeper, which is brilliant, because that's what Mikel Arteta wants, doesn't it, moving forward. Setford and Nygaard, I think we're all in the same boat, as we probably need to see more of them and need to see how they get on, but they're both highly rated, so that'll be exciting to see. But Brian Okonkwo, for me, just has that great frame for a goalkeeper, has great command of his area, great distribution, gets down amazingly low as a shot stopper. Just like his brother, we've seen it before.
Yeah.
Who was an excellent keeper and who's going on to do brilliant things for Wrexham. So I guess it wasn't such a big blow losing Arthur Okonkwo when we knew we had Brian coming up in the ranks as well, who seems to be just as good. So yeah, really exciting for the goalkeepers. It will be, because of the rotation aspect of it, I think it'll take us some time to really get to know them, but it'll be exciting to see.
Yeah, for sure. And Brian, it's funny, like, he does remind me a lot of Arthur, but it's crazy to even say it's possible. He seems almost lankier than Arthur. Like, Arthur always seemed very strong and upper body, like very big. He always commanded the box better. Whereas I actually think Brian's frame has allowed him to be a little bit better with the ball at his feet. Brian, for those who don't know, also has spent a little bit of time in semi-professional football, doing on loan he went to Leatherhead for a period, a couple other clubs that are escaping me at the moment. But it does seem like, going into the season, how we not signed Setford and Nygaard, it would be clear that this is his role. And Alexi Rojas is another one he's a little bit more forgotten in this goalkeeper setup, but seemingly continuing to rise through the ranks, highly rated in Colombia's youth international setup, always playing multiple years above his age group. So one to definitely keep an eye on. And for sure, I would expect Rojas or Okonkwo either at times to potentially play with the under 18s just because of the rotation factor, but don't let that fool you upon where they really stand in the club's values and where they see their futures. They definitely, all four of these are very highly rated goalkeepers.
There's also a possibility that one of them might go on loan as well. I mean, as you said, I forgot about that actually, that Brian had been out on loan and gotten that experience for a few games, hadn't he, which was really positive for him. And that might be the case again, that he might head out again, which would sort of give us a little bit of a look at the other three more often, I guess, if there was one less. So that would sort of make sense, but it might be Rojas as well, because he's, as you said, he's got a great reputation sort of across Europe. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
For sure. And into the defense, this is actually where it gets, I think, very interesting and very inexperienced. This is a defense that's going to need some serious revamping. We'll touch on the names of Zaman Louis, Omar Rekik, some players who probably need to find futures permanently away from Arsenal. But at right back, we actually do have two very, very skilled players and even more players who are deeper in the ranks at this position. Probably Josh Nichols' position to lose, in my opinion. I think Michal Rosiak, who has played a lot of right back with the under 18s, probably will play more in the center of defensive midfield for the under 21s, especially if Lewis-Skelly isn't playing there or isn't with the team. But after Josh Nichols' incredible preseason and basically his last 12 months, you'd have to think this is his position to start the year.
Yeah, I do. And he took his chance incredibly well on tour, didn't he? And really was a great surprise to everyone, really. I mean, he's always been a talented young man, and I remember when I first saw him, he was just a bundle of energy. He's got so much energy up and down that flank, and he's got a great profile for a fullback. He can come inside, dribbling. He can pass really well. He loves to go on the overlap. He loves to put those low crosses in. He's a really good profile, and of course he can go play on the left as well. I feel like a lot of how it will look will be based upon whether Myles Lewis-Skelly plays or not, because if he plays left back, well, let's just say if he plays centre midfield, it might be Rosiak at right back.
Right.
It might be that someone's needed at left back, so Nichols will go over there. So it's hard to, I think, Myles, whether he plays or not, will impact on a lot of things. But I think I agree. Going off what happened on the tour, it was really, really clear that Josh Nichols is developing fast, and that right back spot looks primed for him this season in the under 21s, which will be really exciting. And I can see Rosiak going back to the centre of the field, which is, I think, where he wants to be, and he's gained a lot from playing on the inverted right back role, and I think we'll get to see the fruits of that this season as he plays more inside.
For sure. And, it's funny. We talk about, how great it was to see Josh Nichols on tour and all these young players on tour. But for you and I, it makes it a much bigger surprise what that first lineup's going to look like against Manchester United on Friday in the under-21s. Most of the players who are probably some of the key players in this team were not even with the under-21s in preseason. So it really, it's a bit of going to be an interesting first month of the season. Obviously, there'll be some departures, there'll be some loan moves, whatever may happen, but it'll probably be a lot of different moving pieces. You mentioned Rosiak. I do agree that I actually think his long-term future is that inverted right back spot, but it may be best for his development to get back into the center of midfield. He needs to learn a bit about positional awareness in terms of tracking runners and things like that, and just making sure he is reading the game correctly from a defensive standpoint. And actually, funny enough, think there's more for him to learn there in defensive midfield at the academy setup than in right back. I don't think he necessarily needs to be out there in 1v1s all the time. I'm not sure that will be best for his development. But over to that left back position, Elian Quezada-Thorne is somebody who I feel like has been so highly rated for so long, but has just had some of the worst injury luck. I would imagine he is the ideal left back for this team week in and week out, but with his unavailability, we may see Kamara Ismail. Do you think there's anyone else, other than Nichols, who can really fill in there constantly? Obviously, Theo Julian, a younger player as well, who we've seen him play left back, we've seen him play right back, obviously really more known as a midfielder. But this left back position may be one of the more open ones in the under-21s.
Yeah, I think Cameron Ismail is someone who he's blown hot and cold a little bit, and I think this could be a
Yeah.
great opportunity when, if Myles isn't going to go to that side, then I think it's a great opportunity for him to get some game time and really sort of push on in his development. I think when he was a schoolboy, there was he was one of the best players in that team, and there was a lot of hopes that he would come into the 18s and really he would be the left back that no one could move, and he would go on to better things. But it didn't quite happen for him at the rate everyone thought it would. So hopefully, and he wasn't the only first team scholar last season. That there was quite a few in that bracket that people thought they would kick on a little bit more than they did, and it didn't quite happen for them for whatever reason. So I think Ishmael, this is hopefully his season when he can show his qualities. He's great on the overlap, an excellent crosser of the ball, and I think it reminds me of Lino Souza as well, where he can get into the half space and put those crosses in as well. So I think there's an opportunity there for him to stake his claim at left back. But it is an open spot. It will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if Heaven goes out there at times. It'll be interesting to see if we see Josh Nichols out there a lot. I think in terms of the under-18s, I'm not sure if there's anybody right now that can sort of step up other than Ishmael. So it's a very open spot to be won by somebody.
For sure. And it's funny, it feels like at the younger ages, like under some of the under 16 players, actually are quite a few left backs who are coming up. Whether or not they actually, can make a stake to claim that spot, we shall see. And they may even get an opportunity if Ishmael, makes his stake as an under 21s player. But I think there's kind of a bit of a turnover in the defensive ranks right now where we had, Zach Gaw, we had Will Walters, we still do have Zane Monlouis, but we had a lot of what we thought were very talented players who maybe didn't progress the way we wanted to. And now there seems to be a bit of a gap until the next group. Moving to the center back position, Maldini Kakuri seems to be one who's probably going to play most weeks in center back. His partner should be eyed in Heaven most often, but also you have Josh Robinson who can play a little bit right back as well, a 19-year-old. And then obviously the two 17-year-olds, Braden Clark, who we brought in from Wolves, very highly rated player, and Will Sweet.
Yeah, I like the look of Braden Clark, and I think he's one that could possibly force his way in. Maldini Kakuri is a player that's he's quite striking to watch because he's a really aggressive centre back, isn't he?
Yes.
And he loves a challenge, he loves a duel, and that side of it sort of catches the eye. I question sometimes, is he technically good enough with the ball at his feet, and sometimes that can be something that holds him back. So I would say Braden Clark is the one that when we bought him from Wolves, it was earmarked that he would be, hopefully could push on in the under 21s and challenge for a spot. So that's the one I want to keep my eye on. I think Braden and Aidan Heaven could be possibly a really good partnership. So I'd like to see that a lot more. The feels in that murky water of all our centre backs, we need to do some clearing out, don't we? In terms of Rekic and Monlouis, both of which have 1 year left on their deal. It feels like we need to be a bit more decisive in terms of what we're going to do with those two players and the other few players that have a year left. So I can imagine one way or another, whether it's on loan or permanently, they'll be moving on.
For sure. And to talk about them a little bit more specifically, obviously we saw today when on the day of this recording, Brooke Norton-Cuffy seems to be on his way to Italy to play for Genoa. Pretty decent fee, honestly, for a player who seemingly clearly didn't have a spot, wasn't training. Like, to get £3.5 million plus a sell-on clause, like, that's not great, obviously, but that turns into potentially a £10 million all-in deal if he goes on and kicks on well at Genoa. I don't know exactly the terms of the sell-on clause, but these little things, they make a huge difference. They allow you to continue to scout and bring in players like Braden Clark, Chedak O'Neill, who we'll talk about later, from Northern Ireland, and some of the bigger talents around the UK and obviously in Europe. It does make a difference. And so Zane Louis, to me, is one who, could go to a championship club for a deal, maybe a little bit smaller than that, but in the £1 to £2 million range with a sell-on clause or a buyback clause or something like that. So that's the kind of business Arsenal need to do, at least for these players with 1 year left on their contract. Omar Rekic is a similar one where it's like, even if you don't really get a substantial fee or any fee, building in that sell-on clause. So, you've developed this player, you've nurtured this player, you've brought them into senior football, and at least you're getting something in return, whether it's ends up being nothing, that's okay, but at least broker that into the deal, and they're not just walking away with the academy getting nothing from them. I would expect both Monlouis and Rekik to not play much with the under-21s before leaving. I mean, Rekik's 22 years old already, so.
Yeah, absolutely, and it feels like the club as a whole, in their strategy and direction, are getting a little better at that in terms of getting the right deals for these players, being more decisive. Like we've mentioned, Brooknell and Cuffy. It feels like Charlie Patino as well is one that is going to go that way, I think. So it feels like we're not going to be in the situation with Cozy Adubre, Rule Waters, where they're walking away from the club and we're not getting what we deserve for the part we've played in their development. So hopefully we're moving forward positively in that regard.
For sure. And Charlie Patino is another one where it feels like, some of it comes down to bad luck, but we also have to understand there is fault at the club. He probably should have been recalled at Blackpool 2 years ago when they were on their fourth manager change and it was January. They probably should have recalled him from Swansea this year on the third managerial change and in January. Like, the club has not been decisive enough, and I feel like I've had this conversation and said this so many times, but at least you are starting to see a little progression this window. I think the next 2-3 weeks in terms of the decisions that happened with Charlie Patino, Zayn Monlouis, Omar Rekik, Saladin Uladam Hand, who had an excellent preseason tour, who, 2 years ago, prior to his terrible injury at Hull, was really looking like on track for the first team. I mean, that Hull City loan deal had a buy option in it, if you recall. They kind of had like a year or two where it felt like they were making decisions, and then the last 18 months has really kind of fallen behind. I think the fact that the project took a step up a little faster in the first team than we expected probably played a role in that, not making excuses, but just the truth of the situation. But yeah, Charlie Patino is one where, he probably needs to leave permanently. I think going abroad is best for him. Spain or Italy seem to be leagues that have always kept tabs on him. And I would expect a similar deal to the Brooknor and Cuffy one, where it's probably a very small fee, probably under £10 million, but has a hopefully sizable sell-on clause.
Absolutely, yeah. And these are players, Brooke and Charlie, who we know the ability is absolutely there, and the opportunity in the next 2 or 3 years for someone to absolutely be bowled over by their quality and come and pay 10-15 million for them is absolutely realistic, I think. So for us to then be able to take a cut of that, as we did with the Amari Hutchinson deal, would be great business, I think.
For sure. And people forget that you add up all of these small little sales that have happened. I mean, I did a video recently on the 27-18 Premier League 2 champions, and I mean, that actually did end up having a group of some of the biggest sales. I mean, Emil Smith-Rowe, who just left, Balogun, obviously, it looks like Nketiah will go for something somewhat sizable this summer. But even when you add up those two, like the £8 million we got from Christian Bielik, like those things go together, and you can purchase players. Mm-hmm. You can purchase Lucas Nygaard and Tommy Setford this summer for very small fees and then turn them into profits again. I mean, the club has to run in a lot of different ways. Not every player is an Arsenal first teamer. We digress. Back into midfield. We talked about defensive midfield. It does feel like that's probably going to be Lewis-Skelly and Rosiak for the most part. Is there anyone else you like to potentially play in the space in midfield for the under-21s this year? I didn't have too many names who have staked their claim, but there are definitely some that are in the ranks who could make a play for that spot.
Well, I think there's a couple that come to mind, and I think Harrison Dudziak, he is not really a defensive midfielder, I would say, but he is someone who can play as more of a deep line playmaker,
sure,
more of a tempo controller, and I think we'll see a bit more of him deeper. He's really good at sort of dictating play from deep. He's got a really lovely passing range, and I think we'll get to see a bit more of that. I think there is also Zach Schwab, who I really like. He's got an excellent frame, and he's really a graceful player on the ball, very silky, and loves to carry as well from deep. So I think as he sort of grows into that frame, I think we'll see a bit of a player develop in there he's played quite well in pre-season. He loves to shoot from distance as well. So I think there's potentially we could see some interesting things from him in the 21s, I think. But all, for sure, as we said, depending on whether Myles plays often or other things like that. So I think he'll play some games with the 18s, but I think we'll also see him in the 21s.
Completely agree. He has a lot of physical traits that are very attractive for that position. I think the more that he develops a little bit more pausa on the ball and is able to kind of use his skills a little bit better. He clearly is an incredible ball carrier. And, with a frame like that, just being able to glide past people in midfield is great. And I think continuing to play him deep and learn those defensive responsibilities, learn when to go into a tackle, when not to. I've seen him make a few questionable decisions kind of in that area, but you expect that for a young player in that position. And I agree. I think, if Dudziak plays some right back, if Lewis-Skelly is not necessarily even with the team, you could definitely see Zach Schwab in that position and stake a claim for it, especially once January comes around and those potential, second half of the year loans start to pop up for some of these players. Moving into the more advanced central midfield positions, Ethan Nwaneri, we expect to, play a game here or there with the under-21s, and when he wants to and when they decide to, he obviously will be a mainstay in this team. But in the other positions, you've got Jimmy Gower, Harrison Dudziak, who you mentioned, Ismail Uladamhand, and potentially, obviously, Saladin as well. What do you think will happen here with Saladin? I think it's clear that he is an incredibly talented and gifted young player, but Arsenal have 1 year left, and it may be hard to convince him. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, I think it's decision time, isn't it? And I would love us, and I'm sure a lot of people would love us to extend his contract and then get him the right loan. I think if you asked Mikel right now, he would absolutely advocate for that. He took him on tour. He said some nice things about him as well. He gave him some good minutes. He's clearly a fan, and there's a lot to like about him, isn't there? And he really stood out. He was really comfortable on the ball. He was a great carrier. He really wasn't phased at all being in that environment, and he gave a really good account of himself. And I think we're all really wanted to see more now. He's been really unfortunate with injuries. He's been really unfortunate with loans that didn't quite work out. Although his last loan to Den Bosch, I'm probably butchering that name, but
I've been told it's actually Den Bosch. That's what I was recently told by a Dutch fan. So there you go. Yeah.
The second half of that loan he played really well, didn't he? And got a lot of consistent game time, and
yes,
and you can see that really helped his development. So we just need more from him now, and I think it needs to be decisive in terms of let's give him that contract and let's invest in him. If we can't do that, I think that decision needs to come this summer. It can't be dragged on. And if we can't do that, then we need to sell and get that right deal and get that value. We can't go into, I think, what we've done previously with other players, which is gambling on whether he's going to sign a contract in the next 12 months. And I think we've done too much of that over the last few years, and it's bitten us.
For sure. And I mean, I agree. We've seen such an incredible actual, if you think about it, with all the unlucky things that have happened to him, his development has pretty much worked to plan the way Arsenal saw it. They took a player who probably, when they brought him in, was a little bit more of the profile of a Smith Rowe, who actually liked to be a little bit wider, liked to cut in with the ball, turned him into a very good midfielder who the first couple of years of his development with the under-21s and under-18s really thrived as an attacking midfielder, really was good at picking up the ball between the lines, beating a man, has an unbelievable ability to score from all sorts of different angles with both feet. And then found the right loan for him at what probably would have been at Hull in an unfortunate injury. But then even at Den Bosch, second half of the year, he got to play deeper. He got to play in a team that didn't have a lot of possession. He got to really work on his duels and winning duels. I mean, the difference from him from when I saw him last, it is massive. And then we saw on the preseason tour, he was excellent at putting a foot in at the right times. He really covered his space as well. He was great at building up from really deep and dangerous areas against other senior players. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to. Sometimes as fans, we think our academy players should be on loan at Premier League clubs. I don't know that would be the right move, but finding him a loan to a potential yo-yo club, for the lack of a better term, like a Norwich City or somebody who's certainly fighting at that lower Premier League level, we could really learn a lot about the player. But as you said, if we do not see him sign a contract in the next couple of weeks, we need to find that right deal, whether it's similar to that Brook deal. I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's not enough money. That's building towards what we need to be doing, and that's a good for next step.
Absolutely. And I think we've almost got this reputation where people can lowball us, which they often do. And I think we're trying to change that by getting good deals that may represent better value down the line. And that will, hopefully by doing that and continuing down that road, will sort of change that thought process that teams can lowball us, and we're not in a position where we're getting the offers for our young people like Chelsea and Man City do. But hopefully, if we carry on down this road, we can sort of change that perception, and it can improve.
For sure. And so just to kind of bring that back to the under-21s team, I think the midfield you think we'll see most often? I actually think most often is probably Rosiak, Gower, Dudziak. That's probably like the quote-unquote most often. Obviously, the best midfield is Lewis-Skelly, Nwaneri, and probably Gower is probably that third, maybe Dudziak. I think they're both really interesting players. As you mentioned to me, I think Dudziak is probably one who has a better chance at really being a highly successful Premier League proven talented player. I think he has a little bit of a wider range of ability. I think Gower has there's an element to Gower where he seems to always pop up in these right spaces at the right time, and that is a skill, and he scores some goals there. I do worry about his athleticism at times, although I do think he's gotten a little bit stronger on the ball. But to me, Dudziak probably is the more highly regarded player.
I agree. With Gower, certainly, I've been guilty of underestimating him quite a few times.
Yes.
And he pops up and sort of surprises you and with his quality. So hopefully he can carry on that. And I think he will be he'll get a lot of games this season for the under-21. So there is also maybe a thought process that he could be one that could go on loan. And maybe that would be interesting to see how we do there. I was sort of browsing upon the squad list earlier and thinking, well, who could potentially go out on loan? And there's not a great deal of candidates, but he could possibly be one.
For sure. It's funny. You look at this team, and obviously since went from the under-23s to the under-21s, it did change the age profile of the team a lot. But, I mean, there may not be a 20-year-old in the squad for this team for most of the season, assuming we deal with the likes of Patino, Monlouis, Charles Sago Jr., Keon Edwards, Nathan Butler-Oyedeji, who we haven't gotten to yet. But I'm just looking at the team that I have listed right here. There's not a single 20-year-old. So you may not see that many loans. I agree. Maybe a Gower could go out on loan. Caseta Thorne, if he's healthy, just because it feels like at that age, that might be the right move for him. One of the goalkeepers maybe, but I do agree with you where it may be one where we see much fewer loans than we've seen in the past, just because we're still figuring out kind of who all of these players are and where they fit in the academy.
I just lost you for a second there, so I missed your question.
I think I lost you for a second. Sorry.
That's okay. You're back. I think we're back now.
Okay, cool. All right. On to the attackers. And actually, I think the winger position is one that I'm very excited about, because Ousmane Kamara is one who I think for a couple of years now we've seen a lot of incredibly impressive things for. And then, of course, Ismail Kabia, who in the last 6 months of last season came on so strong. He's a player who had a big injury, and a lot of people didn't know about him. I'm guilty of kind of overlooking him, and he impressed me incredibly. He's one who I think is sneaky, really moving up through the ranks at a very fast rate.
Kabia might be one of the fastest players at the club. When he eats grass, he just zooms past people, and it's unbelievable to watch. And I think you're right. At first, he didn't quite stand out in regards to the others who maybe are a little more technically better. But he's just got that pace, and he's become a lot more decisive in the final third in terms of his actions, and he's started to see a lot of improvement in his goal assist involvement. So it's really exciting. He can play either wing as well, which is good. Quite a few of them can't they, in terms of Kamara and Sepp Ferdinand as well. So they're quite interchangeable in that sense, which is really exciting. We can flip the script mid-game and sort of go a different way. And it's I agree with you. Both wings are quite exciting for the prospects there, which are quite dynamic.
For sure. And it feels like, to me, Kamara maybe sticks out as the flashier, like more 1v1 type of winger that we, have kind of grown accustomed to really liking from, YouTube comps and things like that. But to me, Kabia seems to kind of have this little X factor where he seems to create a little something when you don't expect him to. He seems to be able to, thread a pass that you're not expecting him to see. A lot of what he does kind of, to me, symbolizes his rise to the ranks, which is like unexpected thing after unexpected thing. And to me, he is probably the number one winger on the sheet right now, even above Kamara, who 12 months ago you would have said was probably the highest rated winger of that age group. We haven't yet really talked about Charles Sago Jr., who obviously did get his debut last year. It was very exciting to see. Then had a disastrous loan situation at Swansea. Didn't really play too much in the USA tour. He's another one who we have to decide his future. It does seem like his future is away from Arsenal next year. Is it permanent? Is it a loan?
Yeah, he's got 1 year left, doesn't he? He's another one with
Right.
1 year left. And it needs to be a decision that needs to be quickly made. Is it extending his deal and giving him the right loan, or is it getting the value for him now? I don't think we'll ever know what happened at Swansea. He didn't seem to be injured. He seemed to be just sort of banished from the squad, and nobody from either side has sort of commented on what really happened. So it's a difficult one. We don't know why things stalled the way they did there, but it was a disastrous loan. I think did he play 2 games at the most? I can't
He played
recall.
25 minutes in the whole thing, and then was never in the squad again.
Yeah, and he wasn't injured. I think there was maybe a minor injury there at one point, but he then returned, went to the under-21s, and I think played a very few minutes for them. And then, who knows what happened? But we're in this situation again where it's stick or twist, and we need to make that decision quickly. I'd like to, again, similar to Saladin, I'd like to see him get that deal and then invest in him in the right loan for him. Maybe that's dropping down to League One and testing the waters there. But I'd like to see him get the opportunity to get senior football consistently, and then let's see what he's made of, because he's certainly a really talented player. And I really enjoyed watching him for the 21s last year. He just seemed to go from strength to strength, didn't he? And even made his senior debut, like you said. So it was a fast rise for him, and we need to see that carry on, and hopefully we'll invest in him.
For sure. It does seem like, again, under 21s he's one of those players who's in between, right? Like, he's clearly too good for under 21s. That's not really going to help him progress.
Yeah. Where
does he fit in somewhere else? It's the championship apparently was not the right fit for him, although I think he probably is the level of the championship. I think it was the Swansea situation. They had too big of a squad. They couldn't get all their best players on the pitch. They could not figure it out. Many managerial changes. But up to striker, we have a lot of similar situations, right? We've got Keon Edwards, who has been a bit unlucky and hasn't quite developed the way that it felt like he was 2-3 years ago when he was on the bench in the Europa League and seemingly pretty much inching up towards the first team. Then had a bit of an unlucky loan spell. I actually think he did a lot of good things right at Leyton Orient. I think it was a tough situation. Nathan Butler-Oyedeji, who seems to be on his way out to Belgium. That looks like a permanent move, either to UPenn, and I believe Standard Liège was the other club that was interested in him. So assuming those two players leave, where does that leave us at striker? I mean, Daniel Oyetunde is 17. Is he going to be our under-21 striker?
Well, we're midway through August nearly now, and I'm really surprised we've not made an under-21 signing in that position. We're really light. It's left us really light. And Kean, like you said, is a talented striker. We managed to tie him down the other year, which was really positive. So now is the time to invest in him, get him the right loan, possibly. I think he's another one that maybe he could maybe have the first half of the season in the under-21s, get some games back under him, and then maybe go on loan. But he does have a year left. No, he doesn't have a year left, does he? Or does he have a year left?
I believe he has. I think he has 2.
So I think that will be ideal to give him some games and then sort of maybe test the waters again. I think there's always a thing about loans where if a player goes on loan and they don't immediately score goals or have great performances, then that loan is deemed a failure, which I always think is ridiculous, because actually the experience Kane would have got just by going and playing those games, being part of that squad, sort of learning that professionalism day in, day out is exactly what you want, and it will serve his development really well, and hopefully he'll be a better player for that experience. So I never sign up to that rhetoric that if someone doesn't blow the world away when they're on loan, that it's a failure. I think it can be can be seen as a positive experience from him that can serve his development. So hopefully it does, and he does well for us this season. He's got a great profile as a striker, and I'd like to see him start being more prolific and get the goals that I think he's capable of. But we are short. There's no two ways about it. There was another striker who should probably remain nameless that probably would have been in this picture.
Yes,
but he's not here, so let's not talk about him. But he absolutely would have been the star of this under 21 team, wouldn't he, without a doubt. So we need to replace him. Really, that was a key figure in the plans for this team this year, I think, and it's surprising that we've got to this point and not brought somebody in. But there has been names that the club have been looking at that we've been pipped to the post by the likes of City and Chelsea. So I think they're trying, and we're going after the right names. I think we're just getting beaten by the bigger budgets, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, we're getting beat by a bit of money, and I think it's not just a matter of that we don't have the money, but that's not the structure that the club's in. I mean, you look at Chelsea and City's wage bill at the senior team, it's well bigger than ours, and then Chelsea goes without saying, everything there is kind of nonsensical. But even City or United, even like you look at the wages of the senior team, that structure is going to go all the way down through the academy. We've kind of after the disaster that was our wage bill for kind of the end of the Wenger and the Emery years, we had to basically figure all that out, redo it, and restart it. And so now you don't want to start paying academy players so much that when they break into the first team, they're screwing up the whole wage bill. So I think it's hard for people to kind of see that and understand that because the numbers aren't so public, especially with the academy players. But that's a big deal why Cheeto Obi left. And why maybe we haven't been able to get some of those bigger names. I know we looked at Corn Madden, who's supposed to be a very talented striker in Northern Ireland. Who it's not clear what happened after his trial. It seemed like we were signing him. Like it seemed like I can't remember. He wasn't at Linfield, but whatever club he was at, Northern Ireland seemed to make some sort of announcement about him. But it has not been made official. So it does seem like we're looking for a striker, but the answer for right now are we going to see Seb Ferdinand or Amari Ford play as a central striker? Are we going to maybe see Oyatunde take that step immediately up to the under 21s? I mean, it hurts to play, a player out of position at striker who's a winger. That's not good for their development either. So it's kind of a really fragile thing at the moment.
Yeah, it is. It's, I guess in some ways, it's good for players that it's a position that's really open for someone to come in and take that spot, isn't it? So I think there's a lot. There could be a lot of competition there if people were able to take their game to the next level. But it's hard to see who's going to step into those shoes and be the talisman for this team. And there is a few weeks left still of the window, so it might be likely that we do get someone on. Another player I know we went really strong for was. Rodriguez, the Southampton striker, who I think he ended up going to Lyon in the end. But we put a lot of effort in to sign him. I can't remember his first name now. But he was a really good striker, but it didn't work out. I think he chose Lyon because he thought that would be a quicker pathway to the first team. And there's been a few others that I've heard we've been interested in, but nothing concrete. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But I'm still hopeful in the next few weeks there'll be an under 21 signing in that position.
For sure. And of course, Amari Benjamin is one who probably could have filled that spot. But of course, we let him leave this summer and he signed at Everton. So it obviously does feel like a lot of this happened because Cheeto Obi had left. That seemingly was obviously the plan. I mean, we made a very clear pathway. You are the under 21 striker. You are 16 and you are the under 21 striker. No doubt about it. That is your role. That wasn't good enough. What are you going to do? We're not going to talk too much about it, but Arsenal did nothing wrong here. I think it needs to be said over and over again that they've done everything they could to keep the player. He decided to leave. So we've covered most of the main names that are going to be with the under 21s, but there are a couple for me who are a bit younger who I think could make a real push forward. The two that are at the top of my list, and we did talk about Zach Schwab, who's going to play some defensive midfield. But to me, I think Theo Julien and Andre Anus are two of the most technically skilled players of this age. I really ever seen. I've just been really fascinated by every time I've seen them play with the under 21s. They stick out with the under 18s like you can't believe. Theo Julien in the England Youth International setup has looked incredible. I've really seen him mostly play as an inverted left back there. But these two players have just an unbelievable amount of skill. I'd love to hear your thoughts on those two, and then who else you may kind of have in mind who might pop up.
Yeah, I really enjoy watching both of those two play. Theo Julien just is. He seems to have everything in his locker, doesn't he? He doesn't look like a massive player, but he's brilliant in duels. He has a great passing range. He's really energetic, and he seems to have that creativity when he gets into the final third. So he seems to me like a bit of an all phases midfielder. He seems to be able to do it all. But then we see him play at fullback and invert as well. So he's got sort of so many. That versatility is a real plus of his, and he just looks a really quality player, which I think we'll see a lot of in the 21s. And Anus is another one which he looks really talented. He's another one that could play up front as well. He's played. I think he played recently for the 18s up front, and he's played there at schoolboy level as well. So he's another one that maybe that could be an under 18 player that might surprise and make a claim for that centre forward spot. But he looks a really, really talented player. What I love about the under 18s team is for the forwards and the more attacking midfielders, there just seems to be this abundance of talent which can change positions and play anywhere across the front. When you look at Marcinek and O'Neill and Zasevich John, Anus, there's some really good young players out there, and there's obviously the golden player that we haven't spoken about yet, but I'm sure we will.
Yeah, well, let's just get right to it, because I'm sure people who have made it this long or skipped this far into the video would love to know, can Max Dowman at 14 years old make his debut with the under 21s this year? He is literally one of the most incredible players I've seen at any age group in the academy, but what he's doing above his age is really pretty much unseen at Arsenal, even past some of the levels that Nwaneri was at this age. Do you think we'll see Max Dowman before he turns 15 play with the under 21s?
Whether it happens later on in the season next year, which I think he's 15 on the either the, is it the last day of the year or the first day of the year? I can't
yeah,
remember.
he's late December at some point. Yeah,
something like that. So whether it comes at the end of, sort of towards the end of this season, or whether it's earlier, I think he'll kick the door down, and I think he'll just be undeniable, because a player of that quality you just can't deny. And every time you watch him, he seems better, he seems stronger, he seems faster, he seems just unfazed by any situation he's in. He's one of those players, almost reminds me in the way of Bukayo Saka, where he can have a bad game, but even if he's not sort of in the game, he can do one thing that will impact the game massively. He's just got that quality about him. He's a born match winner, and I think that quality is just undeniable. And I think at some point in the next 12 months, he'll definitely kick the door down into the under 21s. And then once he's in, it's sort of, once he's in and you have a player of that quality, it's hard to leave him out. Arsenal have tended over the years to allow players to be fast-tracked in that scenario, where other clubs are very will sort of, I mean, if you look at a player like Shea Lacey at Man United, they've really thrown the cotton wool over him and really protected him. They won't let him anywhere near the under 21s. But I think that's because of concerns about the physicality. But when you look at Max, he's so strong in his upper body. There's just no concerns there, is there? He will go and play in the under 21s, and he will boss people around, and that you can just see it.
For sure.
Yeah, I've run out of great things to say about Magic Max Dowman. He's just a hell of a player, and like you, I've never seen anything like it.
I really am. If you know, the physical aspects for a 14-year-old we'll just move past that, because it's fascinating the way he's bullying at the under 18s, his speed compared to the other players who are 4 years older than him. His IQ is next level. This is a player who will happily receive a pass almost anywhere on the pitch. He'll receive it deep, in press and turn through two players. He'll receive the ball on the half turn between the lines and drive at defenses. He'll receive the ball playing out on the right wing with his heels on the touchline and make something magic happen, from getting into the half spaces and playing a ball into the box. It's seemingly there isn't anything he's uncomfortable doing. I'm not sure how a player this young has that much intelligence and awareness. That, to me, I mean, the physical aspects are incredible, and I think there's always been questions about Cheeto and his abilities because he is so much bigger. I don't actually think those questions are a problem. I think he's an incredible player. But with Max, the IQ is so undeniable that you almost don't even worry about the fact that he's bigger, faster, and stronger at 14. He's also only 14 playing with 18-year-olds. So I do agree with you. I think it almost gets to a point where for Arsenal, which is, I don't know if they want to play him with the under-21s until they're ready to play him every week for the under-21s, because I think he's going to impress so quickly that you can't then move him back down to the under-18s and you worry that, how that affects a player. Like, I actually think this is really something that we've probably never seen at Hale End.
Absolutely. And I think I get the question a lot, but where should he play? Where's his best position? Where's he going to develop into? And the answer I often give is it doesn't really matter. Because, like you say, you can just put him anywhere across that front, and he'll give you something special. He could be. I've seen him, and he's got no sort of angle bias. You can just put him wherever you want on which, whether it's wide right, wide right. I can't talk. Wide right, wide left, or centrally. He's able to make something happen and create. And he'll just go where he needs to go.
It's crazy, and even for a player that young, he's playing with different players seemingly every week. He's with the under 15s, with the under 16s. He's playing with the under 18s. Like, he just seems to have this ability to play off of anybody. Like, he makes the players around him better. It's the difference between him on the pitch and him not on the pitch is so palpable in those teams when he's not there. He's with the other age group or whatever it might be, and I think that speaks volumes. And I think what you said about Saka is very much goes the same with Max Dowman, where I've never really seen a match where you didn't automatically see his imprint, even if you knew it wasn't his best match. And at that age, to have that kind of consistency is frightening for everybody.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you if you had anything else to say about him, but it's just incredible.
It just made me think of something I saw on X earlier. It was about Bukayo Saka, and it said something like, "Why don't Arsenal fans ever criticise Bukayo Saka?" I didn't respond, but I immediately thought, well, it's because he's incredible and he's our most consistent player. But even if he has a bad game, he does something incredible which changes the game, and that's why you don't criticise Bukayo Saka. And I think Max Dowman is, like we're saying, going to be a similar player in that respect.
For sure. It's going to be, I think, a very exciting season because there's a lot of unknown. I feel like, since about 2018 or so, it felt like we had this kind of group of, Keto Taylor-Hard and Amari Hutchinson into Keon Edwards and a lot of players who we knew a lot about. They had just been players who had been taking the normal steps through the academy. They were under 16s. They did well. They impressed with the under 18s. They get their scholarship. They get their professional contract, and kind of saw this natural thing go over and over again. And the amount of turnover and different 11s we're going to see with the under 21s, the under 18s, some of the outgoings that may happen, kind of almost exciting that there aren't going to be that many loans. Like, there's just going to be a lot of players around the club training with the first team. I think it could be a really exciting year. I don't think this under 21 team is going to go out and win the Premier League 2 this year. I think there's not enough experience, and I think they're going to go through some bouts of inconsistency just because of the amount of changeover. But it should be really exciting. We're going to learn a lot about players that we didn't necessarily know about, and I think, if in 3 months, there's going to be somebody that we haven't even spoken about who may have really done something spectacular, whether it's Bless Alcabayer, who I think a couple of years ago was one of the most highly rated players at the club. Max Kuzinski, who we haven't spoken about, who's a very talented defender. Even to the younger Dan Casey, Louis Copley. Those two midfielders last year with the under 18s kind of just started scoring goals like crazy, like from all over the place. Like, they're two very talented players.
And they've not stopped in pre-season either, so they could be really two to watch, Copley and Casey.
For sure. And then, of course, even younger, with the under 18s in preseason, obviously everything kind of got screwed up, as we were saying, but Marley Frohawk, Marley Salmon, Sarup Sampang, these players are all kind of finding their footing. And I think they all see the fact that what I'm talking about, which is every spot right now very much feels up for grabs. Outside of Myles, Ethan, and Aiden, and maybe Josh Nichols, it feels like you, no matter what age you are right now, you could end the season being a mainstay in the under 21s. And I think it's a very exciting time at Hale End, and competitiveness is always good in sport, and it's always good for the club.
Absolutely agree. It's going to be a good season, I think. And like you said, we might see some difficult patches, some difficulties with results, but I think it's a transitional point for a lot of these players in terms of making that step up. So I think it'll be really good to see how the players develop through the season and where we are, as you said, in 3 months' time.
For sure. Well, Kev, thank you so much for joining me for this. I'm sure we'll talk again soon, whether it's offline or on video, but really always love chatting Hale End with you. Very excited to see what happens. As I said, there's going to be so much unexpected this year in the academy, and hopefully Ethan and Myles become mainstays with the first team, and we really finally get to see what we've all been waiting for a couple of years. It's exciting to have a couple of true Hale Enders who have been in the club since such a young age potentially be a part of what could be a magical season for the first team as well.
Absolutely, and it's great for guys like us. We've been supporting these players for a long time, so it's amazing to watch them come into the first team and grab that attention from around the world at the things they're doing, which they had an amazing preseason. And like I said, there's some great players playing in the under 21s now that could kick on and also sort of make those next steps into the first team. So it's great to carry on watching Hale End go from strength to strength, and I've really enjoyed being on today. So thank you so much for having me on. It's been great fun to sit and chat about Hale End, and it's made this heat a lot more bearable. But I've really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Glad to have done it, Kev. We'll talk soon.
Take care, Will. Thanks a lot.